So I'm going to be continuing to read of Wizards and Heroes on to chapter 2. Of Wizards and Heroes by storyforsomone. We're going to be reading chapter 2, The Boy Who Didn't Exist. I'm going to only be reading a chapter at a time when I read these books because my phone can't handle the storage of doing more than that. So, yeah, let's just get started. The summary of this chapter is Director Fury, you must understand, did not like things he did not know. And then there's a quote at the beginning that says, "We accept the fact that there may be other worlds out in space, but might there not be other worlds here? Other worlds in other dimensions coexist with this. If there are other worlds parallel to ours, are all the doors closed, or does one, here or there, stand ajar?" By Louis L'Amour, The Haunted Mesa. And then the chapter starts. Director Fury was not a man to be easily unsettled. Being the head of the biggest secret service operations unit worldwide, one saw a great deal of strange goings-on. Keeping your head was when the world goes to shit was kind of a necessity. And then there was the boy. Perhaps man would be a better description, though the guy barely looked 20. He looked average enough. Messy dark hair, green eyes behind glasses, an odd-looking zigzagging across his forehead, a lithe, agile build, ordinary, if a little shabby, clothes. Of course, your average person doesn't usually appear out of thin air in the middle of Times Square with an odd symbol stamped deep into the tarmac beneath his feet. Ordinary people do not tend to give off considerable EMP when said appearing act takes place, wiping out half of the electricity in New York. And ordinary people do not, in Fury's experience, appear out of nowhere with no records of any kind. Forgery, he could understand. Deleted records, Fury could have his people find them in minutes. But no trace at all, not even an old school picture, a glimpse of him on a camera, a name, a family, nothing. Fury did not know one thing about him, only what a security camera had picked up about his appearance and that he had an English accent. Fury, you must understand, did not like things he did not know. It was his job to know everything and anything about the world, which made this boy a liability. The last time someone had appeared on Earth with runes in the ground, he had turned out to be a god. A nice god, granted, but a god no less. The director of S.H.I.E.L.D. was not about to make the same mistake of underestimating mysterious figures with mysterious abilities again. Not on his watch. "Some coffee, sir?" Harry started, hand flying to his wand, before he realized it was merely a girl talking to him. He relaxed. Tea would be great. You have tea, right?" The girl giggled. "You're from England." What gave me away? The sarcasm apparently went completely over her head, because she giggled again. "Your accent, it's like that Sherlock guy, Bendium Cumber something." "Benedict Cumberbatch," another voice smoothly interrupted. Harry, who had been watching the serving girl, in the way one might view a crumple-headed snortclack, with a detached sort of bewilderment, turned gratefully to the newcomer. She was pretty, with bright red scarlet curls forming a delicate, aristocratic face. She looked harmless enough, but as Harry met her gaze, he saw a cold hardness in her eyes that he had often seen in those who fought alongside him in the final battle of Hogwarts. It was a look of someone who had seen the horrors of the world and lived to tell the tale. Make no mistake, this woman was very much a soldier in her own right. Harry dropped into Auror habits, letting his body language shift to display an open, relaxed, poised, and easy smile on his face. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "Natalie." She didn't give a last name. Harry's lips quirked and he offered a hand. "Harry." Natalie's eyes sharpened on the name, but she took his hand easily enough. It made Harry wonder just how coincidental this meeting might have been, or maybe that was just his old Auror paranoia. Either way, he didn't see any harm in inviting her for a drink. It's not like she could really hurt him anyhow. That theory had already been tested when a vampire ripped out his throat and he'd woken up without a scratch. And of course, he couldn't escape the irony that his first acquaintance in this new world was, yet again, a redhead. 'Cause Ron was on the train. Yep. Ever since he opened his eyes Ever since he opened his eyes to the chaotic light of New York, Harry had been wandering the streets with a bemused curiosity, wondering if this was some kind of afterlife. There had been no King's Cross in this time, only darkness, then a hard landing on a Deathly Hollow infused ground. Apparently, the hollows could not so easily be destroyed or lost, as they were too. That, or the objects had developed some sort of fondness for their owner. The first few minutes after his arrival had been a panicked jumble of "what the bloody hell is going on," with occasional "where in Merlin's arse had he landed," and the final warning how the flying fuck was he still alive? As the lights began to flicker on around him, Harry had grabbed the invisibility cloak and melted into the shadows, maintaining a steady stream of cussing under his breath. It seemed death wasn't about to let him die so easily, or at least he could die, only to be regenerated somewhere else. Perfect. Seeing the somewhat familiar sights of New York around him, Harry had expertly deduced that he was, in fact, still on Earth, or a version of Earth anyway. He had apparated to London in an attempt to find Diagon Alley without any success, and Hogwarts was the same. The borough belonged to an elderly farmer and his wife. The Ministry of Magic was the base of the British Secret Service. Eventually, Harry was forced to admit that maybe the wizarding world as he knew it didn't exist here. It was Earth, but not. A parallel dimension, a reflection in a mirror, a world running alongside his own like two twin chords in a wand, dancing around each other alike and yet so utterly alien from one another. Perhaps once Harry would have been devastated at the loss of his own world, but right then it was fascinating. This was the most exciting thing Harry had come across in the last century, and he wasn't about to waste the opportunity to explore and discover by grieving over a life he was prepared to give up anyways. This was a chance of another life, where he wasn't gawked at and highly revered everywhere he went, where whispers haunted him down every street, a daily reminder of just how much he had lost, where the name Harry Potter didn't even exist, where maybe, just maybe, he could find his home again. Romanov, what's your report? Target identifies as Harry, no last name given. He matches the description of the man who appeared in Times Square. Definitely English. I'd say Surrey area. He mentioned he grew up in a boarding school in Scotland. He invited me for a drink. Seemed friendly enough. And Natasha Romanov sighed. With due respect, sir, he seems pretty ordinary. Ordinary people do not appear on my CCTV footage in several different continents in the space of a few hours. Ordinary people do not stumble across my division of MI6 by accident. Ordinary people do not just pop into existence one day in the middle of a city that was attacked only last year by bloody aliens. The director was all but growling now. Natasha hid her smile, thankful she couldn't see her. This guy really hated being outmaneuvered. He didn't seem dangerous. Neither does Bruce Banner, until you get on his nerves. If this guy's a threat, we need to know his every move 3 moves in advance. Do you understand? You want me to track him old-fashioned style, or am I using any of that fancy shield tech you pretend doesn't exist? Even over the earpiece, Natasha imagined Director Fury rolling his one eye. I'll send some agents. Barton too, once he's done in Iraq. They'll have the necessary equipment you need. Much appreciated. Either the man didn't hear the dryness in her voice, or he chose to ignore it. I'll expect an update within the next 24 hours. The director paused. Don't get too close. Harry bit back a groan as he caught a flicker of movement in the corner of his eye. A dark figure positioned on a roof, another tailing behind him on the street. Only 2 today. Maybe his other stalkers had taken the day off, he thought wryly. He decided in the end to remain in the States. Harry had only seen the inside of the American Ministry of Magic when he had visited in the past, and New York seemed as good as any place to start exploring. Of course, the experience was somewhat dampened by the incessant stream of coincidental followers he seemed to have picked up on the way. Harry didn't believe in coincidences, but if someone thought he was worth following, it made Harry wonder whether the world wasn't quite as oblivious to him as he first thought. It was becoming routine now. Harry found himself falling back into his old aura tactics: evade, observe, then, if necessary, engage. Merging with the crowds, Harry casually slipped into an alleyway and cast a wordless disillusionment charm on himself. The invisibility cloak was by far more effective, but when he was moving in a large crowd, being completely invisible wasn't actually helpful. The disillusionment charm meant people's gazes just slid over him, and he had far more agility and freedom to run or cast any more spells if need be, and if he was hiding under a great swaths of material. Sometimes the simplest solutions were the most effective. For good measure, he also sent an occasional repel a muggle charm at his followers. He smirked as one on the roof stopped and glanced around in confusion. Either these were amateurs, or they had never dealt with a wizard before. Harry strongly suspected it was the latter. A few minutes later he ducked into the New York Public Library and began piling up a stack of books that amounted far above his head. A quick levitation charm had them following him around happily as he wandered, humming as he went. Upon reaching the counter, the librarian gaped at him. "Sir, you can't possibly borrow that many. The library policy—" Harry waved his hand in front of her face, and she blinked, her eyes glazing over with confusion. Harry's lips twitched. A quick confundus charm worked wonders when trying to stay under the radar. Befuddlement spells weren't officially allowed for mundane things, but that was when he was an Auror, and the Ministry actually cared what he did. Besides, he'd bring the books back. Eventually. When no one was looking, Harry shrunk the books and sent them into his undetectable extension-charmed bag with a lazy flick of his wand. He'd gotten the idea from Hermione, of course, with her small beaded bag. What would she think if she could see him now? Probably be delighted, Harry thought wryly. A whole world out there, and I'm spending my time reading. It couldn't really be helped, though. Upon arriving, one of those things that struck Harry was just how ignorant he was of the Muggle world, since his absorption into the Wizarding world. The sheer technology they had created was unparalleled, and when anything with electricity seemed to die around you, it might be a good idea to figure out how he was going to navigate this world without it exploding everywhere he went. Thus, books. The afternoon found Harry settled into his usual spot in Central Park, perched comfortably on a sturdy bench surrounded by words and paper. The sun cast a warm glow across the pages, a gentle breeze flirted with the leaves above his head, and sat there reading about particle theory. It was the most peaceful thing Harry had felt in a long time. "Harry!" Scratch thought. With a yelp, Harry dropped the book he was holding. His hand flew to his wand. "Quantum chromodynamics?" The voice below sounded dryly amused. Harry glanced down to see Natalie waving a book he had dropped. "A little heavy for Friday afternoon, don't you think?" "On the contrary." Harry stepped off the branch and landed with a neat roll, muscles coiling as he broke the fall. He grinned at the redhead. "I think it's fascinating." If Natalie was surprised at his sudden show of acrobatics, she didn't show it. So nerd by day, mysterious English bachelor by night. Harry laughed. I prefer the term scholar myself. Needed to brush up on some things. "Like quark matter?" she said in disbelief. "Not a fan of physics, I take it." "Not really my field. I take a more practical approach. Blowing things up? Of a sort." Harry smirked. "Careful there, Red. You might actually reveal something about yourself. Says the guy who won't tell me his last name. Would you believe me if I did?" "Natalie." She raised her eyebrows, and for a moment Harry thought she looked oddly impressed. Then the expression flickered and went back to a teasing smile. "You, sir, are a man of mystery. That's what all the ladies say." Abruptly, she laughed. "All right, I'll take a hint. Here," she handed back the book. "I'll let you get back to your tree." Harry looked offended. "What's wrong with my tree? You couldn't just, I don't know, use a bench like anyone else?" He shrugged. "I like being up high. It feels more free." The words slipped out of her mouth. Harry blinked. "Yes, how?" "My friend," she said a little hesitantly. He feels the most at home up high. It's as natural to him as breathing. Sounds like we'd get along." For a moment the two shared a look, something akin to understanding. "Yes, well," suddenly she looked a little uncomfortable. "I'd better be going." Natasha Romanoff could hear Fury jabbering in her ear, demanding why she was abandoning the target so quickly, but she ignored him. She'd completed her task. The nano-tracker had been slipped onto the book. She only hoped S.H.I.E.L.D. wouldn't engage in hostilities straight off the mark. Natasha had developed a small fondness for the boy with the haunted green eyes so like hers. The boy reminded her of Clint in so many ways. "Don't get too close." And as the Black Widow slunk out of Central Park, she wondered if perhaps it was already too late for that. Darkness fell over Central Park, and Harry Potter continued reading by the gentle glowing orb of the Lumos spell. Around him, All around him, shield agents were closing in, fixated on the infrared outline of the boy in the tree. Whoever he was, wherever he came from, in that moment it didn't matter. No one could run from shield forever. It was time to see just who this Harry was. Okay, that's chapter 2. I am almost out of time before my phone decides that it is going to cut off the video. So that was nice. See you next time. Bye.